Thank you for coming to this presentation. I'm Daniel Tal and John Altschuld. John Altschuld and I have been collaborating on and off for the past 5 years. I met John when I gave a presentation at Colorado State University, and he was a very talented postgraduate student, or graduate student, doing urban design, landscape architecture. And I was like, hey, how would you like to team up on some projects? And we've been teaming up ever since then. John and I actually worked together for about 10 months at Stanley Consultants until he got lured away to greener pastures. He really didn't want to work with me anymore. No, I'm just kidding. And we still collaborate on this. And John, myself, and Justin Clark, who's in the back over there, have kind of developed over the years a system in terms of how we actually like to build context models. So never presented this information before, and this is really about all these types of data that you can start bringing in. So I'm a registered landscape architect. I'm a 3D studio leader, presenter, blogger, tech editor at large for Landscape Architecture magazine. John's a registered landscape architect. He's a 3D design leader for the firm THK. He's a 3D modeling guru. Uses GIS, graphic design, presenter. He's complemented by an amazing wife who actually has probably a better skill set than him in terms of design.
True.
And we're going to make fun of each other the whole time. Like, it's bad. Just to plug my website, and particularly the blog. Love people to sign up, share it. And part of what you're going to see in this presentation, I hope to do blog posts about in the future.
Alrighty, so to get started with this presentation, we want to show you guys what we're doing with SketchUp, because we're doing so many different things across so many different fields. We just want to give you a quick flavor of what we're doing. So we're doing all sorts of urban design projects, doing architecture projects, small scale, large scale, visualization, architecture projects. Lots of bridges and transportation projects. Again, lots of bridges and transportation projects.
Tell them about that.
If you guys came up from Denver through I-70, you might have noticed you went through the Twin Tunnels. My firm THK Associates designed that about two and a half years ago. So modeled the entire mountainside, tunnels, again, lots of bridges and transportation. Infrastructure and complete streets, so everything from LID, low impact development design, to complete streets with multifunction. More complete streets. Master planning, really large-scale master planning, which that ties right into our discussion about large-scale context modeling. Utilities, we actually have a lot more images of utilities, but for confidentiality reasons, we can't show them, so you get one. Parks and recreation, we're both landscape architects, so lots of park and recreation projects. Thank you. And trails, so trail design, trailhead design, a lot of terrain, lots of different projects with this as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel. We want to tell you why we're using SketchUp.
So SketchUp for us is obviously a very powerful analytical tool. And it's funny because you've come to this conference and you actually see a lot of visualization here, right? Or you're seeing the documentation aspect of it with PlusSpec, Conduct Tools, Nick Sonder and Matt Downley's book. But the reality is the everyday part of it is really sitting down and assessing how a space or how things function and what that actually means in terms of adjusting the design. So part of it is also creating powerful iterative processes. So this is Destin, Florida. This is a current project that we're doing in Destin. It's, I think, north of Pensacola. Actually, can't remember, west of Pensacola. And they have a very unique harbor district. So what did we do? We went and gathered the information. We built the massing models and then cut sections. And this wasn't really for public consumption. This was direct conversations with the client and trying to figure out what it looks. So looking at their form-based code, looking at their zoning laws and how they might want to develop in the future. And then, of course, we're showing them what we think the preferred options might be in terms of how you might encourage these aspects. The bigger picture here that we want to talk about is the process we use to develop this, because we're given very short time spans to develop a lot of content. In this particular project, it was 3 of us working together, probably for 2 or 3 weeks, I think in December of this past year. Similarly, how to communicate ideas. For example, here, this was a project for a designer out in Connecticut. She was doing it for the former Secretary of Energy, and they didn't understand the grading. And again, we had to build the context around it. And then we actually took that model and converted it down into a CAD drawing that we can actually start assessing the design from there. Communicating design ideas, again, going from a sketch to a photorealistic rendering and trying to understand, do you have any, this is your project, so do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, just a little bit. This is a trailhead design down in Colorado Springs. Very early in the design phases right now. We actually just modeled this about a week ago. But real quickly, we were able to model 3 completely different design concepts for the trailhead and render them out in 3 days, just one person working on it. You know, the elevations and the sketches were great to show some design ideas, but the client really can't get a good feel for the sense of place. So real quickly can model it, render it, and you know, can get a much better sense of what it'll actually look and feel like.
Or a very large scale project. We were given, in a lot of instances, we call it napkin sketches from an engineer. And for me, going to work for an engineering company, I thought I'd be working with a very organized system, like here's everything for you. No, instead, if you figure out that I designed a bridge, don't drive over it. No, I'm just kidding. But this was a project proposal. We actually didn't win this project, unfortunately. Nothing to do with the visualizations. For a sensitive part in Florida, again, called the Crosstown Bridge. And here's an example of where we had 40 hours of work to produce this whole thing, from very limited amount of information in sections, but producing a complete environmental model with it, plus all the roadways. We developed probably, because we use Lumion a lot for our work, and once we build the models, we can produce 100 renders and animations with it within, you know, a couple hours. Any Lumion users in here? Yeah, so you guys understand. If you're not using Lumion, it's great. We also are really looking again into V-Ray and other programs, so not to just say we're exclusive to one particular program. But for example, what we do with this is once we, and we're going to go through the intimate part of how to build these context models. But it's what we get to do with it after we build it and break down the model. Especially for me, doing 4D construction sequencing is really key to explain to people exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, Justin in the back can attest to this. Sorry, Justin. But the amount of work we're able to produce or asked to produce is large volume, large quantity. We've discovered that our firm doesn't fully understand our process, which is okay. They just, at this point, they've come to expect it. My wife once told me, like, don't tell them how fast you do these things. Too late, cat's out of the bag. So this is just, we don't even know, maybe 4 months worth of work that we can actually produce. And we do take these and produce these models and provide them back to the architects or the engineers, help them kind of, we take them into construction documents. So the basic premise here is that we use software, which software programs we're using, which is Google Earth Pro, we'll go over this, Photoshop, SketchUp, Lumion, a plethora of extensions. Anybody come to my extensions class during boot camp? I mean, you saw, like, I love just using extensions. Combine all that information, and then we have the methodology at the end of that, and that methodology leads to speed and accuracy in the detail of what we're trying to do. So similarly, again, going through the different programs, and we're going to talk about specifically, because I'm a very visual person, and I believe when you're doing presentations, throw visuals, not words. But, so Google Earth Pro, Street Views, and Bing, right? Who here uses Google Earth Pro? How many people are aware that it's free? And the fact that it produces and allows you to extract high-resolution aerial data, which is amazing. So you don't have to spend that money or the time trying to get it. Street Views are invaluable. Got a story about Street Views, hopefully we'll end at the end. And then Bing Maps. And then from there, it's using the typical CAD programs. We take information that we get from either MicroStation or Revit or various different platforms. SketchUp is our key modeling platform for everything we do. We use Photoshop in a variety of different ways. And Lumion is our environmental modeling, rendering, animation program. And last, Camtasia. Anybody here heard of Camtasia? Yeah. Which we use for video editing and production, for multimedia work, narrations, overviews. And then in terms of extensions, this is probably most of the extensions that we end up using for any given project, depending on what we're doing. Kind of a complete list. But you can see it's literally our utility belt of what we kind of configure and how we do it. And each one of these tools has a time and a place in which we actually are using it.
All right, so with all of that out of the way, now we're actually going to get into how we're doing it, what our process is. So this is a quick flowchart. We're going to go over pretty much each one of these steps. So quick overview, we start off with step number 1, project startup. So we have to assess what we need to build for the final product, and then we collect data, so context data, base maps, and what else we need so that we know what we're building. Next we go into terrain modeling. We have to assess what kind of terrain we need to build for this model. And we'll go over, we have some different typologies, types of terrain that we use for different projects. Next, the buildings context, so the buildings surrounding your site. The big thing of our presentation, context is king. It's because if you just model the site, you can't get a good sense for how it interacts with the surrounding communities and surrounding areas. So we go into the building context and surrounding buildings, then drafting the site plan. So your proposed design, we actually do almost all of our drafting in SketchUp. We call it 2D sketching, and Dan's going to walk you through how to do that. Quick side note, groups are better than layers, according to me. Dan's a layer guy.
It's a private joke.
Might come up a couple more times.
I'm sure it will. It's like an old bickering couple.
From there, we actually build the model and add a lot of detail. The detail makes a difference. SketchUp vegetation, we're not going to go over this one very much because we only do it on some projects, but there are some really good ways to do vegetation in SketchUp. And then once we have the whole SketchUp model built, we render it. Today we're going to be going over that in Lumion just because, as Dan said, we use that the most. Plenty of other good options out there as well. And finally, exporting and final presentation.
And just to add to this, we're going to actually color code our slides based off this diagram, where John gets his great influence.
I think I'm still up.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, hey, I apologize. All you.
Alrighty, so we start off with the project startup and gathering the context. And the biggest thing to start with is the base maps. So how many of you here have used the geolocation tool in SketchUp? This guy right here. Great. Really simple tool. It'll geolocate the model so you can pull in aerials, terrain, some limitations, but awesome tool. So usually, 9 times out of 10, that's where we start. And then you can tile if you have a large site. So this blue one here, that was the first tile, this one. You can keep pulling in more tiles and they'll line up automatically because it's geolocated. So for this site, our site's basically that big, but from that site you can actually see Pikes Peak, which is off the screen here. So we pulled in all of that context, so when we do the renderings, you can see Pikes Peak accurately where it is.
Can I add one comment to this? So the one thing that we've been trying to do and trying to figure out is how to streamline this process so it can be faster. Because this process, you're going to see it as we go through adding high resolution areas, all these tiles. There's no seamless way to do it currently in SketchUp, even though the data sets are already available in a variety of different ways. And this is excluding the notion if you're using drones to get the information, or even that your own information with a survey or aerial photography. But we do go through this process. An example, we did a project in Arizona for 6 miles, and Justin built probably 30, 40 square miles doing this process. So we could actually place it in the context, which was really key for the client to actually understand.
Exactly. So as we mentioned, it includes terrain modeling. So again, our site's right here, but you can see Pikes Peak from on the ground in the site. So that was really important to show the views to Pikes Peak. After that, almost every single project, we swap out for high resolution aerials. And we have some more examples that show a more drastic change. But on the left, this is the native SketchUp geolocation aerial. On the right, this is a high resolution. You can see the difference. Again, later in the presentation, we have some more drastic changes between those. So where do we get the high resolution aerials? There's a lot of different sources. Dan's mentioned already Google Earth Pro. It's free. You can export them at very high resolutions, and then you can swap it out. Bing Maps is sometimes a really good source too. Depending on which one we go with, it's usually the resolution, the time of year that the photos were taken, and the year, how recently they were taken. Next source that I use quite a bit is ArcGIS. So GIS data is great. It's managed typically by municipalities, so cities or counties. USGS also has a great source of it. It's a little bit trickier to get than just exporting from Google Earth Pro, but you can get really high resolution, 2-inch, 3-inch resolution images. that then we can swap out and use in our SketchUp model. And finally, the last one, drones or planes. Depending on really the budget of your project and size of your project, you can actually fly either a drone or plane and get custom LiDAR and custom orthorectified images that are then current and good for your site.
How many GIS owners? Wow.
Great.
How many people have a drone and are using it commercially and licensed? Licensed. How many people, oh wow, that's right, because we were speaking about that, that's right. How many people are hiring a drone, and sorry, the correct term is UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle. Gotcha. That makes sense. How many people, so just so you know, the services are coming online to hire drone operators. I hope or plan to do an article for Landscape Architecture magazine. We had one written, we scrapped it. I'm going to go back and do that and talk about the specifics how to do that. Ironically enough, we're looking overseas, South America, where there are no restrictions on drones, which is both scary and not scary, depending on how you look at it. How many people know there's 22 near misses a day at airports with drones? Have fun getting on your plane on the way home? Just kidding.
Alrighty, so the process for swapping out the high resolution aerials can vary based on the size of the site. So if it's a smaller site, a lot of times you can just swap out one image for one piece of imagery in the SketchUp model. If it's a large site like this one, because SketchUp has a limit on how large of an image you can bring in, you have to tile it together, which is a little bit more complex process. So each one of these checkerboard patterns, we save out as an individual JPEG and swap that out. So the high resolution file is all of this bordered by the white, and then again, we make a series of files that tile together in SketchUp.
So one of the ways we swap it out is you can link Photoshop and SketchUp together. So we'll bring in these tiles, sample the aerial, send it to Photoshop, import in the high resolution aerial into Photoshop, line it up, save it, and since it's linked to SketchUp, it automatically updates. On my blog, actually, it should have been published this week. I actually have that process, and I plan on elaborating that more because it's key to, you'll see why it's key to everything we do working with this data.
Thanks. So this is that same image. You can see right here, this is the grid in light white, and we're just zooming up on this. So this isn't blurred. This is actually the native SketchUp add location aerial. This is our GIS high resolution aerial. You can see the difference pretty easily, especially when you're doing perspectives and shots from ground level or very close to ground level. Makes all the difference. Also makes all the difference when you're having to trace the aerial to show existing buildings, existing roads, all of that information. After the base map, we want to gather any other contextual information we might need. So this includes being mapped bird's eyes. This can be really helpful for modeling context buildings. Yes, question?
We'll get to that.
But no, you can map the high res onto the terrain. Other options are Google Street View. Again, really handy for as you're modeling the context to get it to the accurate level of detail that you need for that project. And finally, site photos. Depending on the project, where it is, how close it is, you might have access to all sorts of site photos to show what you need to model. Gather all of that in the beginning so that you can formulate a good plan moving forward.
One more thing to add to that about drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. A lot of products now have the ability to do photogrammetry, where you do 360 views of a site with photographs, upload that up into the cloud, and they can actually produce topographical models and 3D models for the site. Just depends. So just so you know, like, there is a lot of different ways to cut the cake in this case for doing this. We're doing it with what's available, quick and free for us to do it.
Right. So step one is now done. We've gathered our base map. We've swapped out high-res aerials. We've gathered any other context information. Now we get into terrain. So the first thing is, what terrain do we really need to model on this? And we have 5 basic approaches or 5 types of terrain. Number 1, a flat surface model. No terrain at all, just the entire thing is modeled flat. Nice and simple. Next one is we have a series of different flat models that are connected by slopes. And we'll show you images of all of these. Third type is a SketchUp graded model. So it's only using the SketchUp tools and data, so it's not using outside contours, it's not using a DEM. I call it faking it, but I use it all the time. Fourth is what we call real terrain models, and this is from outside data. So imported contours, imported DEMs or TINs, also creating from contours with the SketchUp tools. And then finally, a lot of times we'll combine these into different types of terrains. So as you're moving forward to trying to decide which one you need, this is really what we ask ourselves. How much grade exists on site, and will it really be perceived in renderings? Because no site is flat, but a lot of times it's not really perceivable, so why waste the time modeling it? Next, do you have external terrain data for your proposed design or for the existing? And again, will the proposed terrain really be perceivable? Finally, this is the one that usually makes our decision for us. How much budget do you have? How much time can you actually spend doing this? So for this one, obviously it's not a flat site. It does have terrain, but is it really going to be perceived? No. So we're not going to waste the time. We're not going to make the modeling tougher and more complex. We're just going to model it flat. This one, Dan wasted the time. I'll let him talk about it a little bit.
So I thought I'd be fancy and modeled 0.5% grades, 1% grades, 1.5% grades. And I got all excited and showed it to the client. We were like, what grades? So it was a matter at this point where everything here has a slope, and it wasn't worth probably 8 to 12 hours I spent doing it. It's fun. I knew it was there. That's what mattered. Yes, did. But so there is a time and a place. You can see that the grade that did matter here was around the site, in which we used from contours and different types of grading tools to actually produce them. But for the actual grades, the interesting thing though, I'll change my perspective on this in one level. If you're starting to use virtual reality goggles like Gear, which John's heavily experimenting in, and we plan on doing that as well, you actually can perceive those now if you're placing yourself in the model and actually seeing it. So
Right.
There's a time and a place.
Absolutely.
Any ground rules to give us some guidance as to when to go flat or not?
You want to go, or do you want me to take it?
Go for it.
We'll go through some examples. Really, if it's just for drainage, so it's not a creek or it's not a swale, we do it flat. Now, we are going to show you some ways to fake it. So you can really quickly make berms and ditches. You don't have to be exact, and we'll go into more detail, but if you can show the design intent without making it exactly accurate, then it's really quick and easy.
It depends, conceptually, since we're doing a lot of upfront conceptual work, where we don't have a survey usually, we're trying to just get the point across what this might look like. As we progress, if there's a survey and information, we start integrating that. Ideally, the best data set to work with is a proposed grading set or a survey data set that we do integrate into these models, because then we know that the intent is correct. So it just depends. We keep it very fluid, and our system is about flexibility. And we won't be able to, that's always been the one thing I've always wanted to show in a presentation, is the iterative process modeling, which is just kind of hard to do. I've tried to figure out different ways of doing it where it's coherent, but it just does depend on it. But being flexible with the data sets you have and reintegrating them is important.
And if you're not sure, you can always make it flat and mark up real quick, like move a plane up. This would actually be here. Put yourself in your views and see if you really notice a difference. So this is our second type. We have a series of different flat models connected by slopes. So over here, you follow this line. This is flat. We did add a nice simple curve in there, but this is essentially a flat piece. You have a slope, another flat, wall, flat. Really quick and easy. We're not going in and worrying about the crown on the road. We're not worrying about the drainage on the road, because you're not really going to perceive that. But the big channel, you're going to perceive that. So we model that slope in. So then the question is, well, how do you do that quick and easy? So these two planes, they're both flat, just one's higher than the other. That's the only difference. Real quick, real easy. You'll see we have a line connecting the two of them. So that line is changing elevation. So that's step one. We're going to use extensions for this to make life easy. Soap, skin, and bubble is what we're going to show you. Sandbox tools work for this as well. And how many of you have used soap, skin, and bubble?
Great tool, right?
Everybody else, go get it. It's free, awesome tool.
I don't know, who sat in on the 3-scan presentation? Anybody? They're the ones who developed SoapScan. I didn't know that. Yeah. Really powerful tool. On the extension warehouse.
Yep. Step two, you select the edges surrounding what you want the slope to be, and you hit enter. Step three is you hit enter. It creates this entire mesh for you. quick and easy, really efficient, and now we have two flat surfaces connected with a slope. For the next step, I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
So this is what I call like SketchUp conceptual grading. I'm going to go through this process step by step and explain what's here. This was an imported CAD drawing. I used an extension to actually create the faces. Everything here is flat, right? And the whole idea is I don't have grading information. I have top of walls, tops of steps, bottom of walls. I kind of know the general intent of the design. And so this is for a residential side. So that's one of the things that's important to keep in mind. This process is scalable, doesn't matter how big, how small, whatever the site is. We use this process universally. So the next thing you do is you extrude all your vertical elements. In this case, it's the house, it's the deck, but most importantly, it's the walls, the steps here, retaining walls back here and on this side, the slope retaining wall back here. So why is that important? Because now we've given it all the extruded elevation that we need, and we can start building the rest of the site. So around the edges, you can see in here, we used, in this case, we didn't use soapskin bubble. Hadn't quite figured out how to make it effective. This was a couple years ago. But built the terrain in between the steps in the wall, built the terrain in and around here, and you do it piecemeal. This actually should have been tied together. I don't know why it's not. And grade all the way around. So we're using from contour or soapskin bubble and manually connecting high points to low points. That's all it is. And the process is simple, and if we have enough time, we'll actually do demos of these various tools. But really the point is you don't need the information to get there to produce what you're showing. Then the last part of it, I think this is the last part, just make sure, okay, is then here's Google Earth terrain. So here, I created my grades from just high points, low points. This model is geolocated. I then bring in the terrain from Google Earth, and you can kind of see it around here, and I'll show this process again. We then take our terrain and stitch them together. So we create this, what do you call it, a skirt around the side. Transition, thank you. Between the proposed, the existing. But what's nice about this is this gives us, and you'll see these examples more as we go through it, all the contextual stuff. So we can now very simply build this whole model in context, take it into our environmental modeling program like Lumion, and place this building within a complete context. Now, these terrain data doesn't have to be as accurate. This is all made up. So the next part would actually be doing the grading, which is then you can actually produce contours from that. I'll start this off and hand it out to you. John contacted me. He's like, yeah, I'm doing all this grading. This is the most anal grading I have ever seen. He actually put in all the different topography all around this site. How long did it take you?
So this entire model from a hand sketch plan, modeled, Lumion rendered, multiple renders, and I think a 2 to 3 minute animation, 2.5 days, one person.
I got the complaints via text.
They were longer than 8-hour days.
They were longer than 8 hour days. But, so it really is, you can see the type of stuff that's going in there, berms, hills, slopes, retention ponds, streams, rivers, wetlands. You know, we use the tool, anybody use Artisan? Yeah, great tool, the sculpt brush on Artisan, of course, which allows you to really seamlessly actually mold and model terrain. Again, all conceptual, all made up, until you actually get the contour data that you want, which we'll get to.
Go back real quick.
Oh, sorry.
And every one of these that you're seeing is done with soapskin or Artisan. And we're going to walk through a couple of them real quick, but yeah. Every single one of these, though, is faked in. This is why I call it faking it. It's not true to the exact proposed contours because we hadn't done a grading plan. We knew the design intent of where we were doing wetlands, where we were doing raised paths, the amphitheater, how we do it. So it's all faked in. It doesn't match the exact contours, but it completely captures the design intent and makes the difference then when you do the final renderings.
So here, actually, do you mind talking about this?
Sure. So again, faking it in. So soapskin and bubble can actually be used on flat surfaces too. So this upper right one, when I first drew it, it automatically created a face because it's completely flat. Delete the face, select the loop, do soapskin, it'll create this whole grid. So the reason I delete the face and do the soapskin is it has a lot more faces now. Soapskin has another really cool feature. called generate subbubble. So you hit that, you enter a number, and it'll actually inflate or deflate it to create wetlands, depressions, berms. So really quickly you can add a lot of fake detail in. So same thing, made it, it's flat, made it soap skin, depressed it with a negative pressure, and then I used Artisan to create some artificial islands and create the channel more. Really quick, really efficient. So Dan says it's anal grading, but this is what you get as a result.
2.5 days. So, and the whole process here is really to get the design intent across, and especially since his office is experimenting with the Samsung Gear.
Yep.
And if you haven't tried it, the virtual reality vendors, you know, for us, the whole idea about VR, and I'm going to try not to get off track here, is it's useful, especially as a design assessment tool. But you can place yourself on the ground and look around. And for me, I finally, with the VR gear, feel like I'm getting something as a designer where I feel like I'm actually placed in model. The nice thing about the Samsung Gear is it's exceptionally portable and exceptionally affordable. I mean, it's under $1,000 to get the whole phone and the gear. And then Lumion, for example, and a lot of these other software allow you to actually export these images out and directly place them on your phone. One thing they didn't mention to you about the release of mysketchup.com that's really neat is that your browsers, whatever one you're using, are VR enabled. So now that you're actually going to be able to model SketchUp through a browser, it won't be a big, difficult leap to actually get that into VR. Again, just you can start seeing some of the more beautiful detail work, a lot of time on this, and putting it in there to get the design intent across. And another thing to mention about the type of graphics, Lumion is very quick. You're not going to see the type of graphics that Alex Hagraf created, which actually are beautiful, take a lot more time. These are very utilitarian. We do a lot of utilitarian rendering because it's really to get the point across. Usually clients are like, wow, that's in 3D, that's amazing. So talk about SketchUp graded models, SketchUp tools and data only. So here, this was an imported location tool map in SketchUp. And I used an extension called Contour to generate contours to just see how the contours look and what they mean and how they function. So there's not a lot of grade there, but if I go to Google Earth Pro and turn on the terrain and 3D information, I know that there's a good amount of elevation in here. And I don't have that data available to me, so I have to kind of, you know, unfortunately, fake it. And the way to fake it, I'll show you 2 slides here. This gets a little bit detailed, so I'll go a little bit slow here. We've already swapped out the low resolution aerial with several, I call it Frankenstein here, several 1, 2, 3, and 4 high resolution aerials. And there's a process that I went over specifically in one of the bootcamp classes on how this process actually works, where we stitch it together. I wish it was a bit more seamless and easier. Hopefully that's something that will develop in the future. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is, see this grid, this mesh? We just simply took the sandbox tool. Everybody knows what the sandbox tools are, right? And you take the add detail tool, which you actually, how many people have used add detail? Wow, nice. Yeah, you would definitely, David would definitely use it. And actually make the mesh tighter. And then we can go in there and actually use Artisan and sculpt out a swale for us. And then we also tied this all in. I don't know why we did that at that particular point, but we actually took it out and tied it into the aerial. So this is what those contours look like after we actually go through add detail. And then we actually went in and actually asked the people that we were doing this proposal for, can you actually give us a little bit of information about what the grades are, what the elevations are, so we can get that a little bit more accurate. Really just real quick. So from there, all the way to there, then you can see the grades. Okay. So 4th type, real terrain model. So this is where, I skipped that slide. So this actually was proposed contours that were generated from a survey and then manipulated in CAD with the correct spots. We use something called Topo Shaper. Topo Shaper, yep, great tool if you haven't used it. You can get it on the Sketchucation site. Highly recommended as a mesh tool. But then we build the grade, and I'm sorry, this was existing grades. And then we start actually this process of modeling the terrain and the site. So here we're using the drape tool to actually drape the road, or you can use something, Valley Architecture Instant Road, which will actually let you actually create a somewhat accurately graded road. Anybody use Instant Architecture? Usual suspects are raising their hands. Chuck Valley, Instant Architecture, they're an amazing suite of automated tools. They will automate roofing, automate fencing, automate walls, and help you generate topo, and actually do striping for you on roads. Stop clicking. Then I model the walls and the buildings, and I drop them down on the terrain. Then we're using another tool, Tools on Surface. Basically, we're cutting out this terrain piece, and that's our extent, our grading extent. Cut the hole out, and then using a very simple process, we start going in there and regrading the site based off our desired look and feel. You can start measuring out some of the grades in there, make it seamless. There's our vegetation blocks that came from CAD. Drop them down onto the surface, and then with one click, you can replace them. This whole process for any typical model that we do, once we gather all the information, is probably 4 to 8 hours, depending on the size and scale of the project. Question? I do not use the stamp tool. It's not very accurate, and I can actually build the grades manually. So the question is, there's a stamp tool in the sandbox tools. Why don't I use that? The reason why is because if I'm manually creating the grades, I can actually do it more accurately. And go ahead.
And a lot of the projects that we have, so if you go back, it's not just the house that would need to be stamped in, it's the house and the retaining wall. So a lot of the projects we do have multiple pieces that are interacting with the terrain, so the stamp tool doesn't work as well with that. This method, we can create the transitions between a house and a wall, the top of the wall to the terrain, and so on.
And I hate doing this, and I apologize, so I'm going to plug my website. But I have 5 hours of tutorials on this model to show you how you do it on my website, and how that process works, from excruciating detail to excruciating detail. So this is another thing that we've been doing, and this is combining terrain. So in this case, the project site is here. The context is important, but we can model this on terrain, but we don't want to because of the amount of time it has to do. This was for a Tiger Grant proposal, where we had to produce this site and render it and show, actually we all had to go all the way down, if I believe, further down. So what we did here was, this is all flat. High resolution aerial, we drafted it. I'll show you how we drafted it in SketchUp, because my preference at this point is to draft in SketchUp. How many AutoCAD users? Yeah, right, sorry. No, I'm just kidding. Vectorworks, Dynascape, anybody? Revit. By the way, just as a quick plug, there's a company called Flux here that's developing a kind of SketchUp to Revit exporter that you should go look at. And they're looking for feedback, just to kind of point that out. So what did we do here? We brought in the terrain from Google Earth. We brought in the flat. We deleted some of the terrain from the Google Earth, and we just, using soapskin or from contour, stitched them together. So we created our own scene to actually make these models work together, and you can see the result. And for us, automatically, now we have all this high resolution aerials, we have all this aerial information through here. It looks great when it's rendered. We'll show you some of the rendered drawings for what that looks like.
Is it a true large on the bridge?
Yes.
We actually do go over that a little bit, in a little bit of detail. But a lot of it depends on what our source data is. So, like Dan said, at the engineering company, we would get, and he probably still gets, everything from literally a napkin SketchUp, this is the river, this is the bridge, move the bridge here, to full Revit and MicroStation where they actually have 3D profiles.
But we actually do the profiles ourselves using Profile Builder. And again, if you knew that I designed it, don't go over it. Kidding. But yeah, so we do actually, everything we do, we try to get to some level of accuracy, even to the point where we'll sometimes do the 2% crowns and rows. Question? Another, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So this is another example. It's actually a different project, but right adjacent to that trailhead project I was discussing earlier. So just another example of how we stitch it together. So this out here is just the native SketchUp add terrain, geolocation terrain. We had existing proposed contours for the actual site. So all of the green is just created with, sometimes I use Topo Shaper. This one was just using SketchUp's from contour sandbox tool to create the terrain, so it's a lot more detail. And then I use Soapskin to create this transition. So basically all I have to do is select this outline, hit Soapskin, it makes the transition mesh for me. So if we look at it with the hidden geometry, you can see low resolution, medium resolution, high resolution as far as the terrain goes.
So how does this process work with stitching it together? And I'll admit this isn't the best example, but I'll try. So here's proposed contours that was given to us. It was surveyed and adjusted based off the grades they wanted. Used Topo Shaper, which is our primary tool to create grades. Again, Fredo 6, Sketchucation, Topo Shaper. If you email me, I can actually tell you about that. We use another tool. So we have to actually, this is an irregular outline. It's not flat, right? This is how do you stitch together all this irregular geometry. There's a great tool by Chris Fulmer. It's on the extension warehouse. It's called Select Outer Edges. Doesn't matter what you select, it will find the profile in and around the edge of a boundary. So it gives us that boundary. And then isolate that boundary line, that boundary edge. And from there, I can combine it. Here's the location tool terrain. So here's our proposed grades. Here's the location tool terrain. And here's the skirt around it. And so the edges that we used here were then used and connected to this. And the result is this skirt all the way around the site. You can see what it looks like here. And mesh from contours. There's the skirt itself, this transition zone between the two models. There's the mesh from the proposed grades, and there's the result. And again, high resolution aerials combined with it, and put a boundary in there, and we get to produce this. This is an ongoing project that me and Justin are supposed to be working on. Yeah, I'm going to get hate mail soon, I know that. All right. Architecture.
So on to the next step now, creating the building context around.
I love to do architectural modeling. I love to animate stuff in SketchUp. I'm just kind of showing this off because this is the kind of detail sometimes we go to. For most of your models building site context, you're not going to this level. But here's another level of detail. So going back to that Florida project, we started off with massings, then we go in there, we do precedent study, we actually went up and down. So if you ever heard of Seaside, we actually went to Seaside and some of these communities along there, took photographs, used street views. Ironically enough, there was no Bing imagery for those locations, so we couldn't use that. And then we started modeling typology. So these are definitely just massings where we were experimenting with the roof styles and roof heights, and then different types of intent of mixed use, so ground level retail, administrative office with residential on second floor, offices, depends on what we were doing. Mixed in with the existing buildings that we keep as free massings originally. But so, going from highly detailed, next level of detail, just depends on how much time is the project budget. But you could see that to the level of detail that we start getting into it, really trying to articulate, especially, who here's heard of form-based code? You're going to hear a lot more of it. I mean, it's the new term for zoning. And if you saw Spencer Branson's presentation on the city of Fort Collins, you're going to see, so the whole idea is trying to figure out what's the building heights, what are the articulations for architecture, really becomes a key part of the master planning effort, and getting all these different types of typologies and buildings in. And honestly, for projects like this, we spend more time building the architecture to the level of detail we need because we know it's important, than actually the building massing and design, though this was an interesting project in terms of getting all the road work in. So you could see, again, there was 2 or 3 of us full-time on this, 2 of us?
Yeah.
I think I was just managing and telling you what to do.
3 of us, but 2 of us actually working.
Thank you. Same thing here. So here we're combining 3 typologies. Detailed building, really fully articulated, building massing with high resolution photo textures, and then just solid building massing to give you this context. So really, the exterior to kind of give us the heights, to give us the context around it. Yeah. Oh, sorry, we were supposed to talk about that.
So another way we can grab context buildings, as Dan was alluding to, these are simple massings but with photo textures on them. There's a lot of those already available on the 3D warehouse. Now, a little tool that some people know about, but it's a little bit hidden, so not everybody does. If you have your model geolocated with that add location tool, you can open your components window, you can click this little arrow, it's actually the one to the right of the home button, and there's an option nearby models. If you click that, it'll automatically pull up any models that are geolocated in Google Earth nearby. So you can really quickly start pulling in models that are nearby, that are already made. So all of these models were already in the 3D warehouse. Just had to geolocate the model, hit nearby models, and pull them in. Of course, you can also just go online to the 3D warehouse or within SketchUp to the 3D warehouse, and you can search. If you know the exact building you need, if you know what's in Google Earth, if you click on it, it'll show you the title of that model. So, of course, you can just use 3D Warehouse to get context buildings.
And just one comment to this, I've been collecting and building buildings for 12 years. I've recently dumped them onto 3D Warehouse under Daniel Pod Collections and some of the samplings that you can have, just so people can use them. Some are massing, some are detailed, and for some reason spent a lot of time modeling the Chicago skyline, just because I fell in love with it. It's beautiful. So one of them was like the NBC building there. I.M. Pei's building, so just some iconic architecture, but also massings, different things that you can use for context.
And so then, another way to start creating massings, if you can't find them, is use Google Earth Pro, go into the 3D view, and use Street View so that you can assess what you need to build. So really quickly, with quick Street Views and Google Earth Pro, you can make a massing and figure out what kind of roof it is, approximate height, so you can model these massings really quickly if you can't find something appropriate to use. So again, use Street View, use Google Earth Pro. This is SketchUp. You can actually see, if you look closely right here, the border between the high resolution arrow we swapped out and the low res. Build the massing really quickly. Another, Dan already mentioned it, Valley Architects Instant Roof, which is part of the Instant Architecture scripts, can make roofs super quick, gets all of the details in there.
Just one comment. If online, on the extension warehouse, anybody use 1001 bit tools ever? Yeah, there's an instant roof, a different version of instant roof or a roofing automation plug-in there as well.
Yep, thank you. So then go back to your Street View, go back to your Google Earth Pro, take a look, see what's going on. You really quickly model the sides, model the roofs, get the detail in that you need. Again, use the context that you gathered in step 1 so that you can make this stuff really quick and easy. And lastly, like we've been preaching, let the extensions make your life easier. So this is a fairly large list, but the ones in yellow are the ones that we use really commonly with quick building massings. So instant roof, joint push pull, rotated rectangle, not an extension anymore. Now it's built in natively to SketchUp, which is great. 1001 bit tools. And then Chris Fulmer's Greeble is a really interesting tool if you haven't used it to create huge massings of just random building heights. And last, as Dan was talking about,
So
he has a huge library.
I've finally assembled a collection of my buildings, so I highly recommend that you do that. Save your buildings out. You will want to reuse them. We cheat buildings that kind of look similar and not get accurate if we're doing site work. All sorts of different types. Let's see if we can find any of the massing ones in here. I have massing buildings on here. There is another product out there called Modular. I haven't used it a lot. It's for FAR for SketchUp, so you can do build big massing models with specific parametric FAR information to it. So there are tools out there to also assist you in automating the production of building context. And here's just an example. That mine or yours? I don't remember.
That's yours. I just stole it.
Yeah. See Chicago skyline thrown in with a building from Denver. drafting. This whole thing was drafted in SketchUp, all of it. So you can see the line work, the striping, the details. We really get down to as much level of detail that we can put in there. Again, you can see the terrain. This is a SketchUp animation, and just to plug SketchUp animation, how many people produce animations out of SketchUp? It's become really fast, right? They improved it in SketchUp 2014 or 15. What used to take 30 hours takes 10 minutes. I love that tool as a quick way to actually show clients something, how that works. So, when we're happy and lucky, this is the kind of information that we get from somebody to produce a road. And we also do this type of work, we also do the design, but in this case, we work with a really talented planner named Randy Duzan, who's like, and for this particular site, it was really complicated. This was in Moline, Iowa, for the Tiger Grant again. It's a good project to highlight. So we take this PDF of information, and then what we do with it is using the same process to swap out the low resolution aerials with the high resolution aerials in Photoshop. We take the PDF, make it a PNG, overlay it onto the aerial, and then we bring it into SketchUp. It's not always the best kind of interpretation of that information, versus the refined line work that you see here, or relatively refined line work. And of course, we always ask him, can you go do that in CAD? And he gives us a very explicit answer. But that would be great. But we take that information into SketchUp, and then the conversation starts. Do we want to do this in CAD, or do we want to do it in SketchUp? Which one's going to take the longest? My preference is to do it in SketchUp. We actually figured out it's probably about the same amount of time, which means it's just tedious to draft it. But so here's a drafting plate. Go ahead.
Real quick, one advantage that we found though is, as I'm sure you all know if you've used CAD to SketchUp, you get some gaps, faces don't get formed quickly. This is seamless because we're never using CAD. And I am a CAD guy, but if I'm in SketchUp, I draft it in SketchUp now. Because then when we draft it, and Dan will walk through the process, everything meets up. We don't have gaps, we don't have things that we're having to extend or trim. So it's really clean. You take out that cleanup process.
And I'm also a CAD guy. I started off CAD in '99. So, for me, the process translates over. So what's the nice thing? Why do we put a drafting plate over it instead of just drawing on the area? One, it's habit. Two, part of it is that some of this is overlapping over terrain, so you can't draft on the undulating surfaces, on the organic surfaces. So what we do is we put a flat surface over our area, we lock it, it'll make it a group, see, using a group, and it's locked. So when we select items, anything that, and the other thing that's really important here is layer management. See?
Fair enough.
Where we're turning off any other information that might interfere with drafting the particular information. Also, there's a lot of things going on here. So drafting plate, layer organization, and then we turn SketchUp into a plan view. So you go under camera, you make it parallel projection, and set the style view over here to top down. So we're in a true plan view. We create a scene for it, so just in case we accidentally rotate, we can go right back to that scene and tilt it right back. One of the interesting things, Concept Tools by Mike Brightman actually has a system built into it to automatically put you into a plan view system and also automate the creation of some of these scenes. So what does that look like? Here's the drafting plate again over the site. We turn the opacity and the color down so we can see the aerial underneath it. And then we'll start drafting it. So here you're seeing a more finalized version of drafting in SketchUp. One of the things that we do in SketchUp, because there's a lot, this whole thing is arcs, right? There's not a lot of straight edges here. It's mostly arcs. Always set the arc tool. The arc tool and the circle tool automatically default to 12 faces. Who knows what I'm talking about here, right? Yeah. Set that to 60 to 100. You'll pay the price later for it in some form, I'm sure. But you're going to get much cleaner edges and the ability to actually draft that out using a more faceted, high-faceted arc system. as we're drafting it, just to make sure everything is lined up, we are color coding the areas that we're creating, the faces we're creating, so we can see through to make sure that we're lining it up correctly. But every part of it is drafted. And the way we're doing it is using lines, arcs, the offset tool. We use the weld extension, so we can actually do the same way you do typical traditional offsets in AutoCAD. So if I draw this entire edge out, I weld it, and then I can offset it so I can get these arcs and curves in there. Same thing all the way around. So there is a process to drafting it as quickly as possible, and that extension in terms of using weld is actually useful. Here you can see the detail we have. We go all the way down. We draw straws in the office to see who does the striping. You know, all the different line markers. But you can see for the crosswalk intersections, we're actually putting everything into it. It's like a traditional CAD drawing that you might see to draft everything out and trying to do it as quickly as possible. Oh, there you go. You know, these darker lines, they're not thickened edges. Those are actually double lines representing the curb and gutter. These are planter areas, and again, you can see. And I won't lie, this is kind of tedious, but at the same time, when we're done with it and it's rendered out, you know, you've got all that important context that people can actually relate to on a scale level.
And go ahead. Real quick note on the last one. Again, let the extensions help you. So one thing to think about, curb and gutter, if you use a profile builder or follow me, even if it's a very simple profile of the curb and gutter without curves, you can use that. And if you do that, then you don't have to draw the front of curb, the bottom of curb, and the top of curb. You just have to have one, offset it 1.5 feet for the entire thing. So you have your street, you have your planter bed or sidewalk, and then your profile builder, when you go to 3D, or your follow me, will fill in that curb and gutter gap.
Who's used Profile Builder? There's Profile Builder Pro. It's on the extension warehouse. It's a great tool in terms of the automation. If we have time again, we'll demonstrate Profile Builder for you. So then here we have the aerial underneath here, and then we have our drafted site plan that we want to merge into this aerial. So it's the same process we use to actually merge the proposed contour data with the Google Earth data. So what we do here again, extensions, Chris Fulmer tools, select outer edges. So I'm selecting the outer edge of this entire group that we can actually use to stamp into, relatively speaking, not using the stamp tool, but cut a hole that's precise in the flat aerial to merge it in there. So you can see that's what select outer edges does. It will occasionally pick the random edges in here, but they're easy to just deselect. You copy, once it's highlighted, you do copy, and then you paste it outside of the group doing something called paste in place. Who uses paste in place? Can you imagine not having paste in place in SketchUp? I actually have it shortcutted. I sit on people's computer, i.e. Justin, who doesn't have a shortcut for it, and I get angry. I'm just kidding. But then what we do is we then drape that boundary down onto our Frankenstein kind of aerial that's all patched together. And then, we cut it out. So now we can exactly locate this site plan into the high resolution aerial and make it as all the seams are lined up and merged together and match out. And that's that.
So then once you have the site plan drafted and integrated in the terrain, we're in SketchUp. Go to 3D. So we're going to start just popping up your buildings. You might have building models that you already have from the architect. You can locate them right onto the site plan. But it's adding all the detail. So in addition to all the 3D stuff, it's adding site amenities, stock amenities from the warehouse, custom site amenities, and we'll go over a bunch of different types. Then terrain details. We'll go through that as well. And then finally, as Dan was talking about, the iterative process, you start working on very similar project types. So we have strategies for those. So 3 that we work on a lot, parks and open spaces. I do a lot, so when in doubt, fake it. Bridges, like you asked about, we're going to show you how to quickly and efficiently do that with profiles. And then power plants, we're not going to go over very much, but just like we've been talking about working with Revit and MicroStation and other files, that there are some advantages to that. So detailing the model. Here's some examples. This is the same exact site we were just looking at. So this is the crosswalk, the crossing signs, the street lights, the pedestrian lights, the monuments.
And go back to that for 1 second. So what? Go ahead.
How do you deal with that, all the structure
Depends on.
It's a great question. So how do we deal with all the striping? Are they independent objects or are they actually integrated into the terrain? I'll give you two answers, both. I'll explain. So, striping is painful, I won't lie, but it obviously adds, for this particular complete street example, or pedestrian-friendly environment, adds a lot of relevant detail. So to back that up a second, first and foremost, we do not extrude anything until we've added color to it first, and then we've got everything else, we're sure we're not making any changes to it. Because the minute you start extruding it, you're in trouble in terms of any iterations that you're making. It's possible. For the striping you see here, those are components. They're extruded probably 1 inch?
Quarter inch.
Quarter inch, is that what we do?
Quarter of an inch.
Quarter of an inch, and then we array it all the way down, or we use, who uses path copy? So you can use path copy and actually array it all the way around. Really powerful tool. And I have some of these. We will have time for tutorials. We're kind of burning through this. But for the striping like this, I'll actually draft it into the site plan. What we'll do is we'll actually make one of these, make it a component first, copy it over to the other side, take that one, rotate it out, edit it, and then copy it over to the other side. So whatever it is that we can do to actually save as much time as possible, so I'm not doing road striping, try to do it. Valley Architecture, Instant Road, actually has an automated striping tool that works relatively well if you have the patience to sit down and do it. Anybody ever use that? Instant Road? Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, I know, David. And then we'll go through there and we'll start placing all our objects. But yeah, we try to add as much of the detail as possible.
There's actually one other type of striping where we have to integrate it in. So for instance, you guys asked about arching bridges. Can't just have a level block of a stripe placed in because it's going to be sticking out of the road. So those will actually have to drape or use the extension super drape to drape them into the terrain. You know that name. Justin knows what I'm talking about.
There's also the AutoCAD polyline.
Yeah, so one other workaround we use is CAD users, if you've used the measure tool in CAD to basically do an array of blocks, we'll do that. The block comes into CAD, it's already on the whole curve, and then we can either move it down if it's flat, or if it's arched, we can drape it onto the arch.
The important thing to point out about this whole process is that it's not a static system. It's dynamic based off the tools you have available to you, and trying to modify it as best possible to get to the quickest result. And that really does depend on the project type.
So more details, the column tops, the railings, the street signs, just all of this detail is part of that next step of adding detail to the model.
And one thing about this, I don't know why we added it, we actually put in all the girders for the bridge, even though no one's going to see it. We were probably thinking that we probably have an animation or walk or stand under the bridge, but those are curving and arched. And again, that's Profile Builder, just in case we kind of somehow are going to use that. The fencing along the wall, along here, this is all instant fence by Valley Architecture. Again, allowing that automation to actually use that. That's parametrics. You can actually modify it based on what you're doing. Very powerful set of tools.
So more detail, again, like Dan said, the girders underneath, street lights, little walls, railings, street signs, median monuments.
And to go back one more, sorry. So for a lot of this entourage, we'll actually get it from either Form Fonts. Who here has a subscription to Form Fonts? And Form Fonts is like $120 a year. They have high-grade models that you can use for a variety of different projects. And it doesn't have this 3 million models that you see in 3D Warehouse. However, we are big users of 3D Warehouse. Part of the process we didn't show you is we'll sit there as part of this project, whatever project it is, and actually go through 3D Warehouse for 3 or 4 hours and extract the models we want. We'll modify them. So for example, the street highway signs, We'll go get that, modify it based off the needs, so we don't have to model it straight from scratch. The nice thing, as they pointed out during the keynote, is that they're asking a lot of product manufacturers now to actually produce models, hire modelers to produce modelers, to actually go and produce that. Just as a side note, SketchUp does have a program if you are interested in doing product modeling. They'll kind of train you through it and they'll hook you up with the product manufacturers. I've done it before, it's really painful. It's highly, highly detailed work. But the point is, a lot of people go to 3D Warehouse and if they don't find it within the first 10 minutes, they give up. It is worth it to take your time to go through the 3D Warehouse and actually find some of the entourage you can use or use form files.
Absolutely. So the result, this is Lumion. You know, it's a far more detailed model. Get a lot more out of your model by adding all this detail. So again, the signs, the lights, the striping, the girders. So again, just to wrap up some of these amenities, it's benches, it's light posts, traffic lights, awnings, planters, tables, shade structures, fences. Like Dan was saying, form fonts, 3D Warehouse. One of the really nice things with 3D Warehouse is they now have a lot of them organized by company. Question towards the back?
Yeah, so are you adding most of those amenities in with Lumion or with 3D Warehouse? And I ask because I'm wondering how big your file would get if
Sure. So most of it we do.
So what the question was is, are we adding that information in SketchUp or in Lumion? How big are our file sizes? And so to address file size, number one is because we're bringing in high resolution aerials into SketchUp, and there's a setting in SketchUp, and I can show it to you when we demo, to make sure that it does display a high resolution aerial. SketchUp automatically compresses images to 1024 by 1024. You can turn that off. Our file size in SketchUp is composed of two things. Number one, the high resolution aerials will balloon the actual file size. So our typical file size is 100 to 200 megs. If you saw Spencer Branson's presentation, his file for the city of Fort Collins in SketchUp was 2 gigs. He sent that to me, and I was like, is there another way to open it? And then he blamed it on me because it was my method that I told him to use, which was totally fine because it was such a big aerial. So that's number one. The other thing that affects performance and file size is the amount of geometry that you have in your model. And that's under Window, Model Info, Statistics. I dream in this, by the way. I see menus, I'm just kidding. Window, Model Info, Statistics, Show Nested Components. It will tell you how big your file size is in terms of geometry. SketchUp can handle a lot of geometry. What they don't tell you with every release is that they're actually ripping out the hood and actually improving the performance. So for example, when I used SketchUp in 2003, it could only handle a file size with 50,000 faces. Now we could do up to 3 million faces. I once experimented by pushing it to 150 million faces. It took a while to open that file too. But the point of that is that if you take it into Lumion, Lumion might not be happy, and a lot of these rendering programs might not be happy if you have a lot of geometry there. It won't care about how big the file size is because of uncompressed aerials. But sometimes it'll just take it longer to load is what we've discovered. But sometimes you have to be, if I can go back for a second and explain, we do try to be very conscientious of we do try to be conscientious of trying to look at the amount of geometry that's on, go all the way back to the SketchUp model here. Go forward one more. Thank you for that. Thank you. So all these rounded objects, we are trying to be conscientious. So there's times if we're experiencing a lot of lag because the file size or the model geometry size is too big, we will go try and remodel some of those components to actually make them less polygon intensive. Because ultimately the amount of time spent to take a component that's got 100,000 faces on it and you put 10 of them in your model and all of a sudden you have 1 million faces in there, going in and reducing it will save us a lot more time than rent. Question?
Hey Daniel, it's Kenneth. Yeah, I've also found that if you're going and grabbing models from 3D Warehouse, a lot of times you can simplify them a great deal before you ever include them in your own model.
That's right, because they have an option in 3D Warehouse to poly reduce. Is that right? Yeah. So that's a great point. Thank you for pointing it out. So before you download a model from 3D Warehouse, it will tell you how big it is. And again, don't worry about the actual physical file size as much as the polygon count. And you can solve that problem by using the right computer, quad-core i7, and a really good NVIDIA graphics card.
How good is really good?
What was that?
How good is really good? Above 9000 series, let's say, or?
In terms of video card?
Yeah.
Oh, we use a 980, 970. We'll probably upgrade to the 1080 cards eventually. We'll see how that goes. But the investment into a video card is the cheapest one to increase performance for your computer. Because all these programs, Revit, SketchUp, AutoCAD, they're all single-thread programs. So you can have as many core processors as you want. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. I apologize. But I'm going to have a blog on performance if it hasn't come out already, because I get this question all the time. It'll come out on the blog. You can sign up for it. I talk in detail over 3 parts about performance in SketchUp and Revit, because I can really talk about it all day.
For this, oh, the stop signs, road signs, they a lot of times it is an image. It depends a lot of times on, a lot of those we're grabbing off of the warehouse. And to answer the lady's question back there, we do put a lot of it in SketchUp, not as much in as far as Entourage, but we try to downsample those as much as possible and use smaller resolution ones. I think we have 2 questions up here real quick.
You mentioned uncompressed aerials, so do you have a preferred file type for your high resolution?
SketchUp will not compress images. So the minute it comes into SketchUp, it's uncompressed. So all the JPEG compression goes out the door. And in terms of SketchUp amenities versus Lumion, depending on the size of the model, Lumion does have a layering system. We will break up our models so that they can actually be partitioned in Lumion under a layering system, which actually helps Lumion's performance. So going back to that master plan for Florida and Destin, what we actually did was all those buildings were brought in separately. The site plan was brought in separately. There's a way to align it using an alignment system, and that actually helps performance in Lumion. On top of it, sometimes Lumion plants aren't enough for what we're doing, so we will import SketchUp plants directly into Lumion instead of having them nested in the model. That helps with performance, plus increase the plant variety that you're using.
So we're going to demo, the question was at what stage do we put color and materials basically. So we add the color, and honestly a lot of times we'll just do really bright colors that are different in SketchUp when we draft it, before we start popping it into 3D. We're going to hopefully demo Lumion a little bit here, and so then materials are recognized as materials in Lumion. So when we get into Lumion, then we redefine the materials to have reflections and absorbance and all that fun stuff. So again, details, adding the details in makes a big difference. Different types of details, use extensions, use the 3D warehouse. And then the next step is terrain details, which we already talked a little bit about in the terrain modeling. But again, you can really quickly add berms, ditches, retention areas, use the soap skin bubble, use the extensions. It can really make a difference. Last point with the terrain details, fake it. So again, this project, same one, the features don't have to be exact a lot of the time in order to communicate the design intent. So the wetland, the low water crossings, the paths, all this doesn't match the proposed contours at all because we didn't have proposed contours. Even if we did, I probably would have modeled it this way just because in order to get it to look right and show the design intent, you have to model it so that it looks correct. So capture the design intent, don't worry about it being exact, it's visualization. That's all Lumion, and we'll show in Lumion there's some really cool mass planting tools.
We'll show you another way. Who's used the extension scatter? We'll demonstrate that.
It's a really good one.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
Scatter's here. You should go talk to them. It's an amazing plugin.
So modeling specific types, next one, ridges. Most ridges have a consistent cross section, so they're not having varying medians, they're not having turn lanes, varying lanes. Some definitely do, but as much as possible they don't, because that makes it a lot more expensive to build. Works well for us because then we can create one profile. So the girders, the bridge deck, the curb here, going across the solid lines we can actually have modeled into the profile. Then we can use Profile Builder 2, Follow Me. If we have that 3D polyline, follow it, it'll actually create the whole bridge really quick. Then we can come back and add more detail like the railing and the dash striping, materials, all of that. So next we're going to get into Lumion. We're going to demo a little bit, but want to go over some quick points about why we use it the most and how we use it. So value of high resolution aerials really comes through in Lumion. You saw in SketchUp how valuable it is, drafting, being able to see stuff. In Lumion, when you're doing renderings and perspectives that are close to the ground, it makes a huge difference. It has some really great mass placement tools. Be able to do vegetation really quickly and pretty high quality. Materials, it's definitely a step up from SketchUp because it's rendering. So you have reflections and refractions and absorbance. There's some really good filters or effects that you can use on your exports, both for still images and for animations. And last, and we're going to show you guys all of this in Lumion, but last, it's GPU based, so it's based on the graphics card. You need a decent processor, but you're going to get really good results. You're going to be able to use it with a high-end video card, and it makes the render time short. So the traditional render engines, which I still use once in a while, you're rendering stuff out, it's overnight. If you're doing an animation, good luck. If you don't have a render farm, you can render out images that would take hours in a traditional render system in seconds. Animations that would take days, we can do in hours.
I'd like to point out about that, we do site modeling. Obviously small, large. There's also Twin Motion, there's Lumen RT, Lumion. I want to mention all of them because again, I don't believe in one single program that does it all for you. For what we do in terms of the environmental modeling area, these programs are ideal. So if it takes us 8 hours to model a site, it's probably 1 hour of Lumion work, and we're done in Lumion to get all the renderings out. For architectural modeling, things like V-Ray, Twilight, Thea, they're from Shader Light, Podium, they're phenomenal as well. And I've experimented and used all of them for project work. So don't walk out here like, oh, you should just go use Lumion. It really is, again, coming back to this level of exploration. Everybody's got demos. See what works best for you. So for example, for Thea, you can do proxy trees and proxy grasses. So all these rendering programs are upping their game in terms of what they offer. For us, for speed, it actually works really well. While it's opening, any questions that we can start? Cool. Go ahead.
We were doing the overview, facing the roads, and you're getting as close as you could. In this plan, they're doing probably 6 inches off. Where do you end up finding out?
We try to be as accurate as possible with what we're doing. And yes, until we had something, because we're not working on. If we had a survey, then it becomes easier. So the question is how accurate is the drafting in 2D in SketchUp? You're going off of an aerial, you're going off of a hand-drawn plan. Without an actual survey, it's not possible. But we do try to get it as, when we're offsetting those lines, 6 inches, 11 feet for a lane, 2 feet for a curb, or whatever it might be, depending on the lot line. So we do the measurements for the design accurately, but relative to the positioning it's in, without a survey, there's no way to get that correct.
And the key to remember is what data we're starting with. So if we have CAD, we'll use CAD. So when we're drafting in 2D, it's usually off of a PDF or off of a hand drawing. So we're as accurate, as a hand drawing. And then like Dan said, we'll start with one line, offset it for the lanes because we know lane sizes, things like that. Just want to blink one?
Sure. Question?
So one of your first slides you brought out was already so I've done that before. I actually want to see it.
Don't laugh.
The clipping plane.
Who has experienced the clipping plane? I have a blog on it. I do. There's no good way to avoid the clipping plane in SketchUp, and the reason why you get the clipping plane is the further you go out, SketchUp's viewing system doesn't have an easy way to actually fix it. There's ways to kind of cheat it. Thankfully, like programs like Lumion, you can avoid the clipping plane, so come in and it'll be fine. But I have found some models with clipping plane problems. Repeat the clipping plane in here, and that drives you bonkers. But there's no good, easy way for me to explain it in a minute, but I can talk with you later. I mean, some of it is changing the camera views, changing the parallel projection. Some of it is actually copying the information out into a brand new model, seeing if that works. Yeah, but there's no ideal way. It's something I hope somebody here will address. Looking at you, Trent. No, I'm just kidding. I'm talking about my
One cheap and easy fix, if you're just using it to work on details, if it's not a view you're trying to export, is the Z key, which I'm trying to remember the tool that actually activated it. It's basically the field of view in SketchUp. You can lower that to 1 or 5, and it's going to look weird because it's going to be really close to parallel projection. But if you're just working in detail, it'll let you get a lot closer in without hitting the clipping plane as quickly.
So we still have more slides to go through because we're going to recap everything, but just to kind of show you, the high resolution aerial in Lumion, all the vegetation. So here's the high resolution aerial in Lumion. It gives us a good idea. I'm going to show this project a little bit, but you can do the mass placement. Draw a line, go pick a tree.
You can do combinations of trees up to, I think, 20 different species in mass placement.
So you can start going in there. And quickly start placing them if you have to. You can do the same thing with vehicles. And they have a massive library of cars and objects. And you can always import your own. In terms of how that works. We can come back to some of this.
Yeah, so
all the entourage here is optimized.
So the stuff we really add in Lumion, vegetation, almost always, although there are some exceptions, cars, people, and then obviously the materials we redefine in Lumion.
What else do we want to show in here?
You want to show any materials?
Come back to that one.
Okay.
We'll come back to this. Well, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Clicker's up there. So the last step, once we have all of it modeled, all of it rendered, all of it in Lumion or whatever render engine we're using, is how do we actually present it to the client? So we have a bunch of different options. If we're just in SketchUp, we use SketchUp images, SketchUp animations, Lumion images, Lumion animations, which, again, because it's GPU based, you can actually render it out on one computer very quickly. Can integrate that into larger multimedia animations. My Lumion, and we're going to hit on virtual reality real quickly. So SketchUp exports, can be really great. This is actually all SketchUp vegetation. Do you use Scatter for that, or?
I manually place all those trees. Not anymore.
So SketchUp with a little bit of Photoshop to get the ground plane and some basic diagrammatic stuff in. This was engineering, all about the equipment. This, very bright colors, but it's all about showing construction phasing.
This one's in Truckee, because I know a couple of people from Truckee in here. Yeah.
And then Lumion. So Lumion exports. These two are raw Lumion, nothing done over the top, just pure exports from Lumion. This one, all we did was add the little blue diagrammatic arrows, raindrops in Photoshop, and grayed out the sides. So In SketchUp, we just separate the models, bring it into Lumion. We can bring them in separately, or just bring it in as one model. This one's all Lumion. Multimedia animations, and I'll let Dan talk to this one.
So for me, the two most effective ways to actually convey a design are animations, and then combining that with multimedia. I did these for the American Society of Landscape Architecture. If you have the chance to go on their site and just view them as these low-budget kind of attempts. I had 2 weeks to do each one. I was given a script. They're like, "We have no money. Can you help us do this?" I'm like, "Sure." About sustainable concepts, really for the general public. If you're a professional, you'll be like, "There's a hole here. That's not right. Why did you even say that?" But the whole point of it is that it's combining all these technologies from Photoshop, rendering, and this is no Lumion work here, SketchUp, whatever it might be, especially to show transitions. That's what I love about multimedia stuff, is that you can show how something is constructed, put the narration on top of it, and produce a vast quantity of work in that capacity. And that, for these animations, it took all the tools in the tool to get them done. Each one was very different in terms of what they were doing.
Yeah, and another note with this, a lot of different render programs use some of these, so if you want to see some different rendering styles and everything, take a look. View, Twilight, Shaderlight,
Everything.
used a bunch of different ones. Dan was involved, I think, in every single one of them. I was involved in the best one, the Edible City.
Question? So the question is, if we get a building, or if we're working on a building, do we eliminate the interior, all the structural? I get a lot of Revit models that I used to use. What we have to do, because they're so detailed, because they're really intended for construction, we strip it out. And the way to do that, there's a tool called Cleanup 3. Anybody use Cleanup 3? Good tool. And then hopefully it's all layered correctly, and we can go in there and strip it out. So we do take time to actually, for exterior modeling, to reduce it. I just recently did a project where we had to keep everything exterior, interior, made it challenging in terms of how to do it. Ken?
Again, another tip about that is never bring it into into the model you're working on. Bring it into an empty, do all your cleanup there, save it there, optimize it there, and then bring it over into what you
It's
get.
a great point, yeah. Open up a separate model when you're bringing in any kind of Revit or model from MicroStation, and clean it up separately, so you actually don't crash your file, and you can clean it up more effectively.
Quick side note with that, the paste and place command, most of you probably know this, but it'll work between files.
Yeah.
So if you copy something from one file, paste and place in the other file, same location. Yes?
Well, when you do that, like in your leftovers place in your shell, do you like eliminate all the layers?
Great question. What do you do a lot of site modeling, or? No, it's a great question. Yeah, we actually, depending on the model organization, we actually will collapse that whole building and put it on a building layer. Not always, but yes, in terms of trying to just keep the model organized around site details, we'll organize the model just based off that. So we'll have a building layer. We usually have multiple building layers for different regions.
So,
Go ahead. That's right. So if you import your CAD drawings in, you're working with them in SketchUp, and either they're jittery or you have clipping plane problems, you want to actually move the site information to the 0 axis point. There's actually a command that will do that. It's basically grab the line work, hit the move tool, and you do parentheses or parenthetical.
well, you're talking in CAD.
No, in SketchUp. You can actually move something automatically to the 0 axis. I could. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. You lose the georeference. Don't look at me, I didn't write the program. Yeah, sometimes you'll bring in CAD work, it's all jittery. One way to solve it is to explode it, which does work. And you might have to do that or move it to the origin point, or move it to the origin point and explode it. Cleanup 3 does work on that a little bit, Justin? Sometimes. Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
Alrighty, so just we'll hit on newer feature to Lumion called My Lumion.
Who's used my Lumion? Wow, really cool, enjoy it, like it? Yeah, of course you have. So, go ahead. Oh, this is mine. So my Lumion, what it does is you actually render out a 360-degree panoramic view, and you can do multiples of these, so you can go up to 10 different views in Lumion. It then uploads it to the web. It sends you a link, and then you can view it on a smart device, anywhere you want to, and you can do complete 360-degree views. And then you can also click, this is what this icon is showing, this little eye will actually show you all the other sequences you can do. So you can jump, you can't animate through it online, but you can jump through. So basically you can render your views in Lumion, you can send it to my Lumion, and then you can send that to the client, and they can do a walkthrough. And again, because our browsers are becoming virtual, they have a gear. We're all going to sit there and have these little goggles next to our mouse now. You can actually watch it in 360 as well. So really amazing feature that we use actually pretty often at this point.
Really handy for sharing either internally with offices not located physically where you are, and especially with clients. Because they don't need to download anything, they just click on the link, they can look around, it's pretty intuitive. Virtual reality. Not all of you guys have one of these setups at your house?
It's kind of disturbing.
That's not either of us, just so you know.
I think I may have dated her online.
But really, virtual reality, to be honest, we're not really sure where it's going to go, but it's pretty exciting. So my office personally, we're experimenting with it tentatively is what I'd say. So this is one of the senior LAs at my office. I love working with him because he's old school, does everything by hand. He sits down, we do SketchUp, and he's amazed by everything. To be fair, I'm amazed by everything he does by hand. But he's used it, loves it. We're actually starting to use it with clients. So Stan was getting at, the My Lumion was kind of a precursor to virtual reality because it renders out basically a 360 sphere of a point. So the result, it's actually a JPEG if you do it for this device. So it renders out one JPEG that's all this, just in one long strip. Basically just copy it onto a Samsung phone, put it in the gear, and you're at that point and you can look around at your entire model, turn whatever way you want, fully submersive. Pretty cool. We're starting to use it with clients. We'll see where it goes. Like I said, we're getting into it tentatively. Just to note, the Samsung Gear VR is a partnership with Oculus. So Oculus Rift is very similar. It's just bulkier. It has to hook up to a computer, but you get a lot more power out of it. We went with this because it's incredibly portable to take to clients. So just a recap of our overall process. You want to run through it now? Go for it. Okay. So step one, we start the project, look at what we need, and collect all the context info. So street views, Google Earth views, base map, swap out high-res images. Terrain modeling, choose our approach, and proceed. Building context, getting as much building context as we can around it, and determining the appropriate level of detail. So building massings, detailed models, and photo match buildings from the warehouse. Drafting the site plan, so our proposed design, drafting it either in CAD or SketchUp. Again, we demoed or showed the SketchUp way today. Groups are better.
I use groups.
Can you do a quick explanation why you prefer one and why you prefer the other?
We'll do it quickly because we
I
can
use
go-
groups. He's totally picking on me. I actually do it. We just have a different system in terms of how we organize the site model information. And we go back and forth, and then I tell him he needs to use layers. He's like, why don't you just use groups? And we go back and forth. We've been going back and forth for a year on this, so he just gets the last laugh.
Always.
He does.
I'd say the quick summary is layers are incredibly important, don't get me wrong. I tend to draft everything on layer 0, group it, and put the groups on layers.
That's correct.
Dan also does that. I just group anally to the smallest thing. So I'll have the street a group, the curb a group, the sidewalk a group. Then I'll have everything on the flat plane a group.
So one question, say, I want to take my buildings, I create a Google buildings, and on there, Entourage, trees, I create a Google versus layer. I can do the same thing with layers.
So there's a really good reason why you want to use layers. So if you put stuff on groups and hide them, right? If you have a big model and you just hide it, number one, if I'm working on terrain, I have to work with the hidden geometry on. Those objects are going to get in the way. Number two, like AutoCAD, objects that are hidden in SketchUp are still processed. If you put them on a layer, SketchUp ignores them, all your processing problems are done. So I'm actually, since we started using Lumion, we've been actually less diligent about layers. What I have to end up going back for a lot of projects is going, because really the biggest reason to use layers in SketchUp was to organize all the geometry that comes in with vegetation. We put in thousands of plants, and you have to turn them off to actually use them so you don't hit your performance limits. At the end of the day, though, it's actually management of your project. So that's really the way to do it. The differences we have is when I'm working on a flat site plan, I don't group, I have all the geometry loose. I'll group the entire thing. He'll go and everything is anally grouped by area, and I just go in there and explode it. I'm like, what is this?
Then I tell him to fix his own model.
So this is why we don't work together anymore, by the way.
So once we have it all drafted, integrated in the terrain, then we add the detail, we pop it into 3D, add Entourage, add any terrain detail we need to, custom features. If we're doing SketchUp vegetation, we can add that in. Again, you guys all seem like you know and use SketchUp and CAD quite a bit, so you probably know CAD block comes in as a component, so it can really easily swap stuff out. Rendering in Lumion or another render program, and then finally exporting and final presentation.
So we're going to do a quick overview of all this. So first and foremost, file management is actually a big deal. Justin in the back, he's laughing because he doesn't let me touch the file management system. In fact, if we have a new project, I have to ask him permission to so he can start the folder. I'm not sure why I earned that kind of particular reputation, but yeah, I'm restricted in terms of how much access I have to these file folders. But we have a file folder system, so you can ignore the top one, fundamentals and plugins, but location KMZ, concept, so this is any of the PDFs, drawings that someone's given us that we're going to use. Site photos, so this is really aerials, big maps, anything else, street views. Then we have the SketchUp folder, Lumion folder, rendering, and then final graphics. And we use this for everything. This is how we've managed probably 300 projects over the past year and a half. Very effective. So file management, I used to work at EDA, a big LA firm where they taught us really important file management systems. And then you work with someone like Justin who's into IT and file management, and you get beat up on it, but it's for a good reason. It actually works. High resolution aerials. So we'll start with a big high-res aerial that will overlay. So you bring in 1 square kilometer, or I think it's 1 square mile from the location tool. You swap that out with a high-res aerial, and then we'll go in there, and there's ways, if we have time to do it, I did this as a demo and boot camp on Sunday, but we go in, and for these specific areas, like this is right here, we'll actually partition out part of the aerial. This is the site itself, right in there, fire station, and actually add multiple layers of high resolution aerials to the aerial. So we have this big, and that has a lot to do with file size management and then how much information you actually want. Because when you extract the information out of Google Earth, if you zoomed in, this is high resolution, but if you zoomed in on it, it's still going to be a lower resolution quality for your site just because it's giving you a big area. So you have to dial it in even closer to get to the high resolution areas for your site. Street views gives us the idea of basically what the whole area looks like. We start modeling buildings, all the different contexts, and definitely give us an idea of what the vegetation looks like. Again, going back to this 3D view, again, all these tools are available for us to just look at. We can start assessing the site, what's the context around it, give us the idea of elevation and the importance there. All the site information, so here's big maps, again, so big maps lets us start looking at building facades, all the different angles, all the different bridges, all the different aspects around it from an oblique bird's eye view. You cannot download these from actually from big maps. You have to do a screenshot and then just save it and we do collect that. I wish they'd let you do a save as for that. So here's the imported location area, low resolution from the location tool, and there's the higher resolution version. So it does become a much useful tool in terms of, and it does actually, since you're adjusting the high resolution location of the aerial, it'll automatically apply to the flat or the terrain data. And then again, you can see the scene. This is actually the high resolution one, I think. Maybe not. Maybe that's the high resolution one, and that was the low resolution one. But then we go, here are 3 different tiles showing much level, higher level resolution. Plus, we'll take into Photoshop and Photoshop out the bridge span or anything, any other information. We actually do a lot of Photoshop work to our aerials in terms of cleaning them up because the aerials become so important in terms of how we're using them. Again, we modify the terrain to actually give us a little bit more conceptual elevation data. And we'll go build the massings, especially anything that's iconic that might look nice as a backdrop. Ironically enough, we never used that bridge as a backdrop, but it was nice to have it in there. And building the massings without getting into too much detail. Go in there, there's your drafting plate. And then on top of it, we start to draft the proposed condition here in SketchUp. There it is, you give it faces. And then on top of it, because the terrain data elevation is here, is higher than these, this is actually broken up into 3 separate planes. So what did we do? Here's the flat one. We added color, then extruded the walls, extruded anything we need to on the walks, broke this up into 3 different pieces, and then rotated it into place so it sits on top of the terrain. Add more detail to the rest of the bridge, so fencing, lights, whatever else that might be important in terms of the bridge itself. Here's a great tool, we haven't gone over this. This is Scatter. And Scatter, we just started using it last week, literally last week. So, in Lumion, to do this would probably take us probably an hour, maybe 2 hours to put all the vegetation tools, all the vegetation in there with their mass placement tools, which is a vast improvement of the way we were doing it 3 years ago. Scatter basically allows you to divide this terrain. I'm using a tool called Tools on Surface. Anybody? Yeah. Tools on Surface, if you haven't used it, again, SketchUcation, Frego 6. So we divide this terrain into individual groups. So you can see this is one giant group of just this area, right? And Scatter automatically will populate this whole thing based off these parameters. It can actually brush objects onto it. It can just scatter them in place with a distribution system. These are all components, and it automatically, within 1 or 2 clicks based off our adjustments, will populate this whole thing with plants. What does that mean for Lumion? Well, there's the mass placement tool. We'll skip that. But to go back to this, my colleagues that are with me did not want me to share this particular piece of information. Nobody knows about this, don't share. I'm open source, I'd love to share everything. So the whole idea here, you can do something in Lumion. Anybody do node replacement in Lumion? Yeah, 1 person. You can bring in these trees into Lumion and with 1 click, replace it with a Lumion tree. So what took 2 hours now took 15 minutes. And again, this comes back down to the economics of all this, of reducing our time, not telling our bosses we did it any faster, of course, but really kind of actually speeding up the process. So this is now our new favorite tool, since we build large, vast regions of actually being, and you can put as many plant types as you want to in here. So we can swap them out with the Lumion library, or if we have other trees and vegetation, really quickly using this methodology. So Scatter, they're actually here. I'd go talk to them. It's really an amazing tool if you're doing this type of work, not just for vegetation, not just for vegetation.
Daniel,
Yes.
quick point, if you know you're only going to be showing this in Lumion, you could do simply a triangle, super low poly.
That's right.
Because you're really just looking for that node.
It's a great point that he's bringing up. And that's, you know, and actually, where I'm cheating this, we actually don't put those trees in. What we do have is a series of just boxes that we place on the nodes. and we just bring that into Lumion and replace it quickly. So we don't have to deal with the vegetation in SketchUp at all. I actually like to add the vegetation in SketchUp because then I have this completed model. I can extract views from SketchUp, and I can extract views from Lumion. So it's maximizing the ability, but yes, you can just do really quick, simple models of that. So just to show the final graphic, go ahead.
When you replace the trees in the how do you the scale of those trees is that why you can bring the trees to
That's one way of doing it, yeah. So you can measure height. But then in Lumion, if you don't get the right tree with the right size, you can replace it with another one. So you do have to go in there and go down and assess it. And it's the same thing you can do with light poles or cars. So you can use scatter for a variety of different reasons. It actually does have a kind of a brush that lets you actually paint it as well. So this became part of the proposal that we won, showing, again, 4D construction sequencing. We did it in Lumion, used InDesign. Just showing how the whole point was to replace this bridge. Here's the new bridge, here's the existing bridge, without impacting traffic. And in 48 hours or 36 hours, we slide the bridge. So we built all this in SketchUp. And of course, I had to tell the engineers, hey, this is a campus. They're going to be pissed off if you take off all their trees and don't put them back in. Oh, they're like, oh yeah, you guys are useful as landscape architects. Ha ha ha. Sorry, landscape architects never know what I mean. And then the final rendering of the project in terms of showing all the context and what it might look like.